after birth, my parents were told that some tests needed to be done.
My mom had a amniocentesis. They said it was a foolproof test, so they knew that she was having a boy. When I came out, they were like, oh, our bad, you had a girl.
I've learned from my mother, everyone in the room fell silent. She asked to see her baby and they wouldn't show her, and then she asked what's wrong and they wouldn't say, and for 3 days they sedated her.
My parents were told that they couldn't tell what sex I was and that they should just take me home, dress me in yellow and green, give me a nickname, and wait to see.
More than 250 babies are born in the world every minute, and the first question we ask, is it a boy or a girl? What if it's neither? What if it's intersex?
What's that?
Never heard of it?
No. Nah, never heard of it at all. What do you mean by intersex?
I was born in Aotearoa, New Zealand in 1953. The first words the midwife said were, "Oh my God, it's a hermaphrodite." Well, to put it more correctly, I was born with what was called ambiguous genitals. The doctors decided I was a boy and my parents named me Bruce. A year later, they were told I was actually a girl. I became Margaret. And then at age 8, I had surgery to rearrange my genitals and make my body look more feminine. Now, I proudly identify as neither male nor female. Hi, my name's Marnie Mitchell, and I'm an intersex person. Intersex refers to a person whose body is not the standard male or the standard female type. The term encompasses over 30 different conditions that all originate prenatally during a fetus's sexual development. Intersex may refer to someone having genitals that are in between male and female, or it might mean that somebody looks male on the outside, but on the inside is mostly female, or vice versa. How common do you think that would be?
I thought it would be very common at all.
I'd say it'd be fairly rare.
How many babies are born with genitals that are so obviously in between male and female that a specialist team is called in? That would be about 1 in 1,500 to 1 in 2,000 children.
Is that right?
That's fairly substantial, isn't it?
More than 1 in 2,000, and that's a conservative estimate. That means there could be as many as 3 million intersex people living in this male-female world. I want to find out why this relatively common phenomena is so unknown, so secret. I want to talk to some of the 1 in 2,000 of us who don't neatly fit into the male-female categories. This is a difficult thing for most of us to talk about, but around the world, more and more intersexuals are now prepared to do just that. So come and see what it's like to grow up in an intersex body. Come and meet some of my people.
Discount tickets, Great Broadway play.
It's hard to understand how you fit in when there's nobody around you that's anything like you.
My old friend Tiger DeVore, believe it or not, when he was born there was some doubt whether he was male or female.
There wasn't a clear determination about sex at the time of birth. The later records say that I had what's called third-degree hypospadias, which means that the genitals are basically open from what would have been the tip of the penis to what would have been the base of the testicles, but could just as easily have been the top of the clitoris to the base of the labia majora. And I had the first surgery to move all that massive tissue into something that looked more like a penis at age 3 months.
Many intersexuals, or as we used to be known, hermaphrodites, are born with this kind of ambiguity of the genitals, an outward appearance that sits somewhere in between male and female. But though intersex births have been taking place forever, in recent times medicine has had the ability to surgically alter ambiguous genitals and render them invisible.
When I was born, my genitals didn't look very much like a boy's genitals. There was something a lot larger than a clitoris, but there was no pee hole in what they thought was the penis, and there was no testes, and what they might have thought of as the scrotum was all open in the middle.
I'm in California wine country to visit my dear friend, Beau Laurent. Beau was the very first other intersex person I was ever aware of.
When I was 1.5 years old, they figured out that I had pretty typical uterus and vagina. Then they told my parents that I was really a girl and not a boy, and then they removed my clitoris completely all the way to the inner parts. And then they told my parents they should move to another town and never tell anybody where they went. They should change my name to one that sounds similar so that I won't notice the difference. And they should go through everything that they owned and get rid of every picture or letter or card that referenced the child who had the boy's name that was me.
This was the second part of the modern formula for treating intersex babies: secrecy, ensuring that the child never became aware of the truth of their birth condition.
I had more than a dozen surgeries before I was 10. There was always a smell coming from my crotch, and I knew that I had infections a lot that hurt. And I have lots and lots of memories of speaking to my doctors and speaking to my parents and asking very pointed questions. Why is this happening to me? What's wrong with me? They would say things like, "You've got a leak, and we have to fix the leak." It was obvious to me this was more than just a leak, because there was no other person on the planet that had this thing going on with them.
And I knew I'd sort of had some difference of the genitals from when I was 5 years old. My brother sort of pulled down my pants to show a neighborhood kid what I looked like down there. I think that my parents were probably told not to talk about it. But some strange things would come out. I remember once I was playing with something like sort of a girly toy. And my mom said, "Well, you're not supposed to play with girly toys." So I said, "Hey, why not?" And my mom said, "Because we're supposed to raise you as a boy. It's not because you're a boy, it's because we're supposed to raise you as a boy."
This model for dealing with intersex children was developed in the 1950s by a team at the world-renowned Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. That team was led by a brilliant young psychologist, Dr. John Money. Ironically for me, Dr. Money also grew up in New Zealand.
Money's theory was that gender was mostly about nurture, about the way you're raised, that it's not about nature, whatever happened to you prenatally. He was using intersex to sort of prove that theory, and he was trying to show that as long as you made a child look typically male mostly, or typically female mostly, that you could end up with a straight boy or a straight girl who had no gender issues and no sexual orientation unusualness.
Hamburg, Germany, a long way from Baltimore. I'm here to talk to Mikkel Reiter, another who's grown up under the gaze of the medical profession.
I was born with a penis, so it was possible to assign me as male at birth. 2 weeks after birth, doctors told my parents, because the chromosomes are female, I have to be assigned female. My first surgery was at age 1. My parents, they have not been able to tell the neighborhood the truth, so they moved. I was a trustless, isolated child that very often go with the parents into the mountains. And the mountains are very empty. There are no people. Later, at about age 8, every half a year, I go to the hospital to widen the vagina. I had about 200 examinations in my life. I didn't want these examinations, but my mother took me there. I didn't trust her. I saw her collaborating with my enemies.
Jen Pagonis, raised as a girl, she only discovered at age 18 that she actually has XY, or male chromosomes.
When I was born, they didn't know anything at first. About a year later, I went to a normal checkup. That's when she noticed something was up with my vagina. And I was 1.5 then, and they removed the 2 gonads that I had in my stomach area. When I was 3, they decided to remove my clitoris because it was too big by their standards for a normal girl. They claimed that they were going to preserve the function and the feeling, but in reality, it was all about appearance, and they kind of just hacked away at it until it was out of sight and out of mind.
I'm heading to the University of Hawaii to talk to Professor Milton Diamond. As early as the 1950s, Professor Diamond was a dissenting voice. He didn't believe that intersex people were the perfect proving ground for Money's theory that gender was largely learnt.
When Dr. Money came along with his ideas, they seemed to resonate mostly with the medical community. So while the rest of the academic world still argued nature, nurture, the medical world didn't. They just accepted that.
Johns Hopkins University is one of the most important medical universities in the world, and there was this real authoritativeness about this is what we do for these children. Doctors became increasingly interventionist, increasingly aggressive in terms of surgeries and in terms of hormonal treatments to try to make sure that every body looked clearly male or looked clearly female.
I didn't believe it was that simplistic. I said that John Money's ideas were not built on any individual that had been brought up in a typical way or lived, as we know, with typical biology. He took that as a challenge that I had sort of thrown down the gauntlet.
In 1966, one of a pair of identical twin boys, Bruce Reimer, had his penis accidentally burnt off in a botched circumcision. His desperate parents turned to Dr. Money for help.
And he said very quickly, if he doesn't have a penis, in this world, there's not many options. I recommend he be brought up as a girl.
Here was an ideal clinical candidate to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that his theory was correct. Bruce Reimer was renamed Brenda and surgically assigned female. Money announced to the medical world that his experiment was a success. The boy, who was sex-changed, was living happily as a girl. The Reimer case became internationally famous, and the model for treating intersex children became even more entrenched. I'm in Chicago to talk to Linnell Stephanie Long, born to a poor South Side family in 1963.
My mother had 6 sons, including me, and all my brothers, they were rough and tough, and they fell down, and they would jump back up. I fell down, I'd sit there and cry like a little girl, because that's what I was. I wanted to be a normal boy. I didn't want what I was called at school, which was a freak. I was maybe like 12 years old, and me and my mom, we went grocery shopping, and this little girl, like kids do, they ask you, are you a boy or a girl? I just let them assume what they wanted to think. But my mom, this is my son, you know, and she got disgusted, and then she told me from then on I had to act more masculine.
At puberty, intersex people are sometimes given hormones to reinforce their gender assignment. But for some, their condition means that they have a resistance to that prescribed hormone.
My voice was getting higher, and I started growing breasts, and I was already on testosterone for 2 years. That's when my mother really freaked out, because the testosterone was supposed to work. The testosterone was supposed to make me into a superboy, and it wasn't doing its job. I was very feminine. You don't be a little wimp in the black community. You can get beat up. You can get hurt. You have to present this air of, don't mess with me. My air was like, ooh. You know?
So I went off to the junior high school. I didn't last very long. I became extremely nervous going to the locker room. I mean, this is in the days when you had to sort of undress and march through the showers and everything. And I noticed I had the smallest penis in the whole place out of 100 guys undressing. So that made me very nervous. And then there was other questions about my body, which I didn't want to reveal.
I was trained from a very, very young age never to tell anybody about what was happening during the summer. I had to go along with an agreed-to fabrication about what vacation we went on, when in fact I was in the hospital for 6 to 10 weeks at a time. So I knew pretty quick that this wasn't something I could discuss with anybody. Because of the way that they make the urethra, which is the hole that you pee through, in between surgeries I would have to keep that open with a dilator. And I wasn't able to do that myself, so my mom had to do that for me. Otherwise, I would have had to have been in the doctor's office every day to have somebody, you know, putting this steel rod into my penis. So, you know, uncomfortable stuff for a little kid.
Growing up with shame and secrecy can have other, more tragic consequences.
If my mother ever saw this film, this is the time she should turn the television off. I was abused by more than one person for most of my life at home, most profoundly from about the age of 10 or 11. and that a feature of that abuse was my difference. Although I was being raised as a male, I was dressed as a female and I was abused as a female. Photographs were taken of me, and an important aspect of that photography was that difference about me.
Our genitals have been touched right from when we're little. We've been taught never to talk about our different bodies. And so sexual predators are very good at picking out children that would make good victims. I was the victim of a person in the community that had easy access to me. He always said that if I ever told anybody, they would cut it off. That's what he used to say. So I can remember when I had that surgery in hospital being sort of outraged and confused because I knew that I'd never told anybody. So why was it being cut off? The secrecy, along with the surgeries, continue for many into puberty and beyond.
Around the age of 11, 12, they said, "We noticed your vaginal opening is a little bit smaller than normal. We're just going to make a little incision and make it a little bit bigger so that you could have normal sex with your husband when you're older. And only a doctor's eye could tell that you're different than any other woman." I started having sex with my boyfriend when I was 16. And it took like 3 months for his penis to go inside of me. And when it did, it really, 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 really hurt. And it ended up tearing me open like every time. But I still thought it was like all my fault. Like I thought I was doing something wrong during sex and that one day this orgasm was gonna happen. I just had to get through this like painful stage. Because like the doctor said, I would have normal sex with my husband, and I just really, really, really believed them. I often would have dreams of cutting it all off, like cutting my skin off or just cutting my vagina off, just not wanting to be a part of my body.
It would seem that the prospect of a child without obviously male or obviously female genitals has been just too much to handle. But what of the people who escape this treatment? They do exist. My good buddy, Hida Valoria.
My mother kind of let it slip once that when you were born, they didn't know if you were a girl or a boy. And she giggled. My father's a medical doctor. What they told him would be different from your average parent. I never heard anything about there being anything wrong with me in any way. So no, I have not had any treatment. I was changing with one of my best friends to go swimming, and I dropped something and I ended up, down by her genitals, and I saw them and I thought, why are hers flat? She's missing something.
I first became aware that I was different when my brother was born. Why did he look different than me? When my parents started to explain, it wasn't that he was different, it was that I was different. I had what was either a tiny penis or a very big clit, and no sign of a vagina, and no testicles. So they weren't really sure what sex I was. My parents would never have consented to exploratory surgery. By the time I was 3 years old, it was very plain that I identified as a boy, and when other people saw me, they always said, "How's your little boy?" or "What a cute little boy you have." And so my parents raised me as a boy. I did not live a horrible childhood at all. I used to tell my friends that I was like Superman. I had fallen from space and they couldn't tell anybody about it, and then I'd drop my pants and prove it to them.
My intersex condition is that where I was born in the female body, however, have the male chromosomes, XY chromosome. Never thought like a female, ever. It's considered the tomboy of the family.
Officer Danny Lee Harris of the Atlanta Police Department, another who managed to avoid early childhood surgery.
My first girlfriend, she said, your clitoris is extremely big for a female. I said, okay, well, I'm just bigger than you. She was like, no, you need to go to the doctor and find out why, number one, you don't have a menstrual cycle. Number two, why your clitoris is so big. And because of that, is what actually started me on my process of finding out that I was indeed intersex. I was working a job over at the local hotel, and a gentleman came up to me and said, "Sir, ma'am, what are you?" Most people probably would have been offended, but I was just like, it's whatever you want me to be.
It was after sleeping with a few different women that I realized, wow, I am doing things here that girls are not supposed to be able to do. The clitoris is the only organ on the human body that's specific purpose is pleasure, and it follows that having a large clitoris is just a very positive thing.
Unfortunately though, even for those intersex people who escape the surgeon's knife, the pressure to conform continues throughout life.
As a teenager, I stopped growing. My mom wanted to take me to a new gender clinic, and it was an absolute nightmare. They said that they had assigned me the wrong sex because there was no way that I could live a normal, healthy life with the genitals I have, and they couldn't make me decent male ones. And it would have been much easier to make me a girl than it would have been to make me a boy, and now I was nothing. I was literally told this. I was 14 years old. They said, you're not male, you're not female, and that's all there is in this world is male and female. You're nothing.
I was taught to be masculine, I was taught to be male, I was told to pass as a boy, I was taught to strive to be as boy-like as possible. It's absurd. I can't measure up to being male. The truth of my identity is that I'm an intersex person. I have this outside physical appearance that is very masculine, but I'm wearing it, you know? I'm wearing this over who I am. I get to be this intersex person in man drag.
The idea was that I could not live an adult life without a set of genitals that looked absolutely male. Why? Well, you can't go into men's bathrooms. What do you mean I can't go into men's bathrooms? I've been going to men's bathrooms all my life. Well, you can't stand at a urinal. And news for you. Any man with a pot belly that hangs over his cock has to sit to pee. Being able to stand to pee is not a guarantee of having a fully formed, normal-sized penis.
A lot of intersex people are born with no visible difference of the genitals. They grow up without any idea until puberty. But for them too, there is pressure to have their bodies conform.
When I was 15, I had been physically developed for quite some time, but had never begun to menstruate. My mother and I became concerned and decided I should go to a doctor and just make sure everything was okay.
They assumed that my hymen had closed so that I was menstruating and that the blood wasn't coming out and that was causing the pain. So they went in and that was my first surgery.
It was when they attempted to cut my hymen that they realized that I didn't have a hymen or a vagina, and that's how I found out.
I was then told that I would have to have surgery so that I could have a normal sex life with my husband when I got married. And I had my vaginal reconstructive surgery when I was 15. My friends were all told that I was going on vacation, so I didn't have anybody come visit me. I laid in the hospital for 17 days with things stuck in me. They took all the skin off of my butt and wrapped it around a mold and inserted it inside of me to create a vagina. And then people would come in and sort of check it and poke and prod, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night and there was a strange man under my sheets. I was like, who are you? He said, oh, you know, I'm the podiatrist. I was just curious. So a podiatrist? I mean, you know.
For other intersex people, the medical solution hasn't been surgery. For them, the intervention was hormonal.
I was told that I had XXY sex chromosomes, that my testicular tissue was so small that it only produced 10% of normal testosterone levels for a male, and I am sterile. And that day, I was started on testosterone. Every hair follicle on my body started sprouting hair. I hated it. I mean, testosterone has had a lot of negative consequences, including 2 prostate reduction surgeries. I wasn't really aware of what it was going to do to me. What it did do to me that I liked was it made me really horny. By 1981, I was infected with HIV because I was having lots of sex with lots of different people. And then in 1998, I was diagnosed with AIDS.
Meet Gavin Coleman, also born with an additional X chromosome, a condition called Klinefelter's syndrome.
Did I say intersex yet, did I?
I don't produce enough testosterone naturally in my body. We've got generally small testes and sparse body hair. You know, we don't grow very much facial hair. I didn't need to shave till I was 26. It's great. I didn't hit puberty. There was nothing happening with me. I had to watch everybody else basically doing what it said in the biology book that they'd be doing, but of course, what was it saying I was doing? There was no explanation. Basically, they were looking at my body and going, well, apart from him having small balls and a small penis, you know, he looks like a normal boy to me. But I was growing breasts. I mean, they were quite small, but they were visible and sticking out on a side view. It was suicidal thoughts. I was getting bullied and slagged. That was the worst part of it, really, you know. Having to listen to other people telling you what you are and you're not even sure what the hell you are. And I'm thinking, maybe I am a girl because I certainly don't feel like a guy. Never felt like a guy. I think a lot of intersex people are not sexually active. To share our body that we're not actually comfortable with somebody else is really a nightmare. It's scary as hell, and you just don't want to risk the rejection.
I got married to a girl. I got married to a girl just like my mother, because that's what every man wants, to marry someone like Mom. And it was the worst relationship of my life. All I knew was I was a guy that was effeminate with a small penis. It was just hard to talk about it. I didn't want to be naked in front of anyone, you know, sex with the lights off. It was hard being this guy, you know, for my wife. And so I decided to get divorced. I couldn't do it anymore. I already started to use drugs in the end of our relationship because it was easy being stoned out of my mind and coming home and just passing out.
I understand these difficulties. For me, I haven't had a loving relationship. After all, I was a child being told that my body was so horrendous and so not okay it had to have pieces cut off it.
People get labeled and dumped into, like, sort of the faggot bag. That's where a guy who doesn't sort of, you know, conform to sort of traditional notions of masculinity must be gay because of their nonconformity. And I got put in that bag. And so that was a very painful thing. That was a very painful place to be in. My orientation is heterosexual. In other words, in my fantasy world, I think about women. When I was like 19, 20, I tried dating a few times. And it usually went nowhere because, you know, they sort of see my difference, the features of the perineum, and they sort of ask me about it, and I'd freeze up and stare at the ceiling. And it was like a disaster. I basically sort of became asexual in the face of all of this. I'm an elderly guy, unmarried, sort of outside the mainstream, and I'm still read as gay. That's what's going to happen in my lifetime, is I'm going to be seen as a repressed gay person.
For those who confuse the boundaries between the sexes, the consequences can be severe. Sally Gross grew up in apartheid South Africa as Selwyn, a boy who was oblivious to how his genitals might be different to others.
I had some sense that something was awry, though I had no sense that it was to do with plumbing. Puberty was kind of confusing. My expectation was that I'd develop some kind of orientation, an attraction of some kind. No. I was asexual. I'm simply wired differently.
As one of nature's celibates, Selwyn gravitated towards religious life, and by the age of 34 had been ordained into the Catholic Order of Dominican priests.
My genitalia are about as radically ambiguous as you can actually get. And it says a great deal about my own kind of naivety and lack of curiosity that this was a penny which did not drop until I was actually in my 40s. If people didn't know me, they'd sometimes certainly take me for a woman. And it transpired that some of the children in the congregation were not persuaded that father was actually male. I knew that there was an issue of kind of gender and bodiliness. I didn't know exactly what it was, so I determined to take kind of advice about it, to know I had not just repressed it. And I was advised to live experimentally in female role. I didn't like the process of having to learn to put on makeup. You know, wearing the clothing, well, okay. In a sense, presenting as female did less violence to me than did presenting as male. But the truth is, I'm a person. I'm me.
This all proved too much for the Dominicans. Sally was eventually pushed out of the order.
My name is Max, and I'm really looking forward to the day when a child is born. You know, people put a sign on the front lawn that says it's a baby instead of it's a boy or it's a girl.
Another one of the close friends I made on my first trip to America was Max Beck.
I looked up at this person, she looked back at me, and I thought, oh dear, pretty much love at first sight. Max at the time was Judy and was living as a woman. I was appalled that she thought this would really have any impact whatsoever on how I felt about her. But she'd sort of been her whole life led to believe that this was not something that could ever be discussed. Doctors had assigned her female, that she'd had a series of surgeries and hormonal interventions to make her into a girl, essentially. When Max was 15, he had vaginoplasty. Because there weren't that many people with Max's medical condition, they had a round robin of residents come and view the effects of this surgery. Now remember, this is a vagina. We're not talking about an elbow. People would routinely lift this drape, check everything out, put the drape back down. This is a 15-year-old girl that we're talking about. That's not dignified. Max was always very male-identified, so dressed more like a guy, did more guy-like things, took up space in a room the way a man would, and ultimately started seeing a new endocrinologist who, on a first visit, said, so what's it going to be, estrogen or testosterone? Because you have to take something for your bones and for your heart and for other systems. And that was really the first time that Max was ever offered a choice. Because estrogens had been such a wretched experience, he thought, try testosterone. Why not? When Max had to renew his driver's license, the clerk took one look at Max and looked at the license and decided some hideous clerical error had been made and just changed it to male on the system. So we were very excited when he came out and looked at it and said, I'm a boy. We got married in the middle of my pregnancy with Alder. We had a shotgun wedding. I wanted both marriage and children. I would have preferred that the marriage came first, but ultimately we decided Max would be in charge of the timing of our marriage and I would be in charge of the timing of children. Alder was conceived with the help of an anonymous donor, and when we finally did conceive her, he went out and proposed the next weekend.
There's Daddy. He's reading me a story. Kissing me.
Max really was my other half. He was my soulmate. And I was so lucky to have him for the time that I did. Well, Max died of cancer in January of 2008. And it actually was a vaginal cancer, which was really complicated in terms of his treatment because men don't get vaginal cancer. So it was about a 3-year battle. And of course, we'd had our second child about 2 months after his diagnosis. It was very difficult timing on a family level because we had this child coming into the world along with this diagnosis of stage 4 cancer. He tried very hard to be optimistic. You know, he really wanted Griffin to remember him, and he really wanted to be there for Alder. When Max found out that he was actually dying, that was the first thing he said, I just wanted my little boy to remember me.
The common story for those of us born intersex has the world of medicine trying to erase our physical differences, surgically and hormonally conforming us to male or female. The theory was that if it was all kept completely secret from the child, they would grow up and be okay. Well, the reality for many of us is it wasn't okay.
I got a gynecologist who agreed to help me get my medical records. She handed me these 3 pages that said I was a true hermaphrodite and that my parents had a son who was named Brian, that he was born on my birthday at my address, and then his name is just crossed out. I realized I was so distressed and I was filled with shame, and I was having really a complete emotional breakdown. I called a couple people and said, I'm so troubled, I just need some help. And I was turned down by each of the people I called.
Like Bo, I was an adult before I discovered the truth about my early years. When my mum developed a life-threatening illness, she organised everything. So there was piles of things that Mum thought were important. There was a piece of sellotape with my name in the front, and while I was flicking through, it fell off. And there was this Bruce Mitchell underneath, which I didn't relate to myself. I thought it was a recycled Plunkett book, or there's 2 entries, one that says, nice wee lad, and another one that says sex determined as female. Now the bottom started falling out of my world.
I actually came to the conclusion I'm gonna kill myself. I was gonna use a straight razor, and I remember thinking about how I was gonna cut and where in order to be most certain that I would be successful while being able to do it with the least suffering. And then I remember thinking, man, I am really pissed. If I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna find the surgeon, I'm gonna kill myself in front of him. That's when the moment I realized, oh, the thing that's causing me to have such a miserable life is not the clitorectomy, it's the shame. And that's wrong. Whatever body I was born with can't be shameful. I thought, I want to figure out how to heal myself and how to have a life that's worth living. I was able to publish a letter in a magazine called The Sciences that announced that I had started a support and advocacy group called Intersex Society of North America, although at that moment all I had was a P.O. box. Pretty soon people were writing, and not long after that I would often call them, and pretty soon I had a headphone because I'd be on the phone for hours with people, and every one of them said I never thought I would ever hear from or meet or read about another person like me. You remember we took those photographs?
Bo decided that it would be incredibly healing for a bunch of intersex people to meet up, to share their stories and experiences. So she sent out an invitation, and one even made it all the way to New Zealand.
Here we are at the first ever International World Intersex meeting. Woo! How does it feel to be here, Mani?
It feels absolutely incredible to have come all the way from New Zealand for the first ever gathering.
I owe her a huge debt of gratitude. I don't think I would still be here on planet Earth if it wasn't for Bo.
I thought when I heard there was an intersex retreat that I was going to meet all these other people with similarly different bodies. And we could discuss, wow, what was it like with you? Did you have this experience? And did you have that experience? And, you know, what is it like with you dating and sexually? And what I found was that these people were traumatized.
I just want to get a dull, rusty knife and start hacking off other doctors' genitals and say, here, you son of a bitch, how do you think it feels?
It was like, you know, wading into a war zone. People treated me like a freak. They lied to me. They cut me up. They harmed me in ways that prevent me from being romantically or sexually intimate with people. They caused me to feel like my body is disgusting. People would refer to their genitals as the genitals.
To have had your most sensitive, vulnerable, private organs mutilated. I used to feel survivor guilt when I first met others in the community. Now I just feel really blessed that I don't have that. I think it's like the greatest gift my parents ever gave me.
That gathering was really the start for me and many others in realising that we'd been treated poorly. We were part of a generation of children who had been surgically and hormonally assigned to fit neatly into male or female. A generation who were left traumatised and damaged.
The problem with money's system is that when it went out into the world, it became a really damaging system. A lot of people had their genitals surgically altered in ways that left them with pain, with incontinence, with reduced sexual sensation, with all sorts of problems, and very rarely with normal-looking genitals.
I'm very angry at the genitals that were taken away from me. Very angry at how much good sensation was taken away from me. I would like to have had a whole lot more say over the body I would have had, the life I would have had, the identity I would have had.
I think it's very likely there are people out there who are glad that they were treated according to the system that Money and his colleagues developed. But if they're out there, I haven't met them. Journalists have gone through over a decade of seeking one person to go on camera, even behind a potted plant, and say, yes, this happened to me and I'm glad my parents made this decision. So where are all of these people?
You know, if I went around and said, open heart surgery is a sham and nobody should do it anymore, we should just stop, a whole bunch of people would come out and say, well, actually, open heart surgery saved me and I think we should not stop. But that hasn't been happening around genital surgery.
But what's most amazing to me is how long Money's system dominated and how doctors all over the world dealt with intersex births. Part of it, obviously, was that it provided a solution to what is considered a very difficult situation. What do you do when you can't answer the question, is it a boy or a girl? And Money's idea that gender is largely learnt struck a chord through the 60s and 70s. And his reports of the success of the Reimer case only served to reinforce the idea that nurture was more important than nature.
He was telling the press and he was reporting in the medical literature that this child who had basically been sex changed had become a girl, had become a girly girl, had become a straight girly girl. And in his own records, he's indicating that this isn't working, that this child is not taking on a female gender identity.
At the age of 14, after years of feeling like she was living the wrong sex, her parents finally revealed the truth about her birth. Brenda stopped living as a girl and became David. Money continued to tell the world that the case was a success.
Here was a man that had married, and to think that he was being presented as a successful woman somewhere in the world really offended him.
The problem was not that he believed in a theory of gender that turned out not to work very well in practice. The tragedy of John Money is that he wanted to hang on to a theory that had made him famous so badly that he did something profoundly unscientific and ultimately inhumane.
After years of struggling with the facts of his childhood, tragically, David Reimer took his own life in 2004. Despite the fact that intersex people around the world now say that their treatment was wrong, and despite the fact that the medical model formulated by Money and his colleagues has been largely discredited, hospital practices have been slow to change.
Still in the United States, like about 5 non-consensual intersex surgeries done each day on intersex children, so the actual practices haven't changed all that much.
When parents have a newborn intersex kid, they're told their kid has a deformity of the genitals, right? Those are the words that are used. And then the doctor comes in and says, this is easy to fix, 1 or 2 surgeries, kid will never know. So, of course, nervous, frightened young parents of an infant are going to say, absolutely, do the surgery as soon as possible.
We can take your hermaphrodite child, guess what they would have been if they weren't what they are, and then turn them into something they're not so that it's easier for you. It's a ripoff.
So, what should happen when an intersex baby is born?
Number 1, love your child. I don't care what else you do. That child has made no mistake.
You have a healthy intersex child. The kid's gonna be okay. And when it comes time, the kid will be able to get educated and make a choice about what kind of surgeries they wanna have or not have any surgeries at all. If necessary, we can manipulate their hormones, but they may not have to have their hormones manipulated to puberty. They'll just grow and be fine and have the identity of their own choice. That's what should be happening. That's the truth. That's what's healthy, that's what's real, that's what's natural.
So much of what I see reflected in the lives of intersex people is the effect of intolerance of difference. I fantasize about what life would be like if intersex was treated just the way it should be, like no big deal. Many intersex people have gravitated towards a place where they can be themselves. Probably the most open and accepting city in the world, San Francisco. I love it here. I love being able to be queer and...
You're not queer.
You're normal for San Francisco. Republicans are queer.
My great friends David and Peter, gay man on the left, intersex person on the right. In San Francisco, they're just an old married couple.
We met in March of 1978 at a bisexual potluck in Sunnyvale, California. He was 28 and he had these gorgeous brown eyes. Next thing I knew, he was sitting next to me and we're making out in a circle.
We started dating each other, and here we are, 31 years later.
You know, people are just really cool with it here. I mean, I think this is the city of exploration, right? It's the most progressive city in the country. If you can't do it here, you can't do it anywhere in the country, right? This is the place when I was really passing as a boy, right, and people couldn't tell what I was. This is where it was totally okay. I mean, even if I drive an hour out of the city, then suddenly it would not be okay. But this is where really people are like, well, maybe they're a transgendered person.
One of the other intersex people I met on that first trip to America was Suji. She and her partner Anne find the San Francisco attitude easy to live with.
A lot of people are willing to say, well, I think those are two lesbians, but I'm not sure, and, well, it's none of my business. You know, so I think living where we live, we get a lot of room.
Yeah. As long as you're putting your recycling in the right containers and not smoking, it's good.
Suji was the queen of street patrol. That was the official title. And one of the martial arts trainers, I was very impressed.
She thought it was cool.
Yeah.
I think she still does.
You just said to me, you should know, I'm not exactly a man and I'm not exactly a woman. And that didn't really even make a wave in my world. I was just like, okay, that's, you know. And I don't love Suji because she's intersex, and I don't love Suji in spite of the fact that she's intersex. Suji's just an extraordinary person, and I feel very, very grateful to have met her. And I joke sometimes I have to look real good when I go to Suji's work because I want all the nurses that are after her to know that, you know, that she has a wife.
But then, of course, it is possible for intersex people to find love and happiness, no matter where they live.
I've never been single for any appreciable amount of time in my life. I noticed that there was a gay nudist group in Rochester. I went. I got picked up. You see, being different is not horrific. It does not make people run away with revulsion. They will ask you questions, and this is a bad thing. You get the spotlight, you get a microphone. Are you kidding? This is wonderful.
I suppose what it's really about is being comfortable in your own skin.
When I was 44 years old, I started to have urinary problems. And I didn't know what on earth was going on. All I knew was that something was changing. And I was having a whole lot of pain every time I sat down. I felt like something was tearing. I went into my doctor, and that's when I learned that I was actually XX, not XY. That I wasn't a partially developed male, I was an overdeveloped female. Age was separating a bifid scrotum, revealing that I actually had a vagina that was totally closed over. Here I am, 44 years old, and I find out I've got another piece of playground equipment I didn't know I had. I wasn't a man missing testicles. I was a man with a vagina.
One of the other places that intersex people can be out and open is the internet. The anonymity of cyberspace has led to an explosion of intersex material. Type the word intersex into Google and you get hundreds of thousands of results. Many of these are support groups and forums where intersex people can talk to each other.
When I had my surgery, they told me I would never meet another woman such as myself. Now I correspond with hundreds of women every week. The people that have taught me the most are the people that I've met from the support groups. They have not been the doctors, they have not been the experts, but they have been people who have lived through the same thing that I have.
It's almost a universal experience of intersex people that they think that they are the only person with this thing that ever existed. What the internet has done is given us access to each other.
YouTube started because I thought that this is the perfect way for me to express myself.
Hello and welcome to Intersex News, yes.
I've posted more than 1,300 videos in 2.5 year period. Most are to the absolute maximum mark that I can go to, which is 11 minutes, even though they state you can only have a 10-minute video. Well, actually, you can have an 11-minute video. YouTube is a platform for me to reach out to a possible entire world. It's a diary, and it's a risky diary because I have been very open on myself. Telling people is important.
Oh my God, let's get together on it. Let's really get intersex spread across the world.
I'm using my big mouth to essentially destroy my life in ways, but actually I'm okay in this world. Yeah, I have issues with my genital size. What man doesn't have a situation going on in their head about the size of their members down below? You know? Every man, doesn't matter what size it is, they're still gonna think, oh, it's not big enough. You know? But I help people who think they've got small penises. I go, that's a small penis.
There's more to being a man or a woman than just a genital. People have genitals. People are not genitals. Now, I know that's hard to believe because we've all met a lot of pricks in our lives.
Nature loves variety. We're all tall or short or fat or skinny. Why should you be stigmatized because your clitoris or your penis is smaller or larger than somebody else's?
I love being intersex. I just wish they didn't fuck with my body so much.
We have created this cycle of, oh my God, we have to fix it, shame it, hide it, and then there's another intersex birth. You've never talked about the one that might be your neighbor.
I consider my sex to be intersex. I mean, I do cross the female box when I have to choose one, but my body isn't female.
It's not just male, it's not just female. I'm intersex.
Sorry, society, because it would have been so simple if it was just male and female, but you're gonna have to change your mind now.
Intersexuality is the most common congenital difference. It's gonna be here, and we're gonna have to deal with it.
It's about down there. We're not allowed to have anything different down there.
Being intersex has been, honestly, a gift for me.
It doesn't suck to be intersexed. It sucks to be persecuted. We share that with everybody.
I am different because I was born different. And you were different because you was born different.
Intersex isn't uncommon, it's just unheard of.
So, now you've met some of my little tribe. Well, I say little, but there's a lot of us out there. You just don't normally get to see us. For some reason, any blurring of the two genders is still an uncomfortable concept for many people. But it doesn't have to be. Yes, we've got something different between our legs. But we're really just people. We live in houses, go to work, we have friends and family, hopes and dreams. We are people, just like you.